Students of Reddit, what was the worst teacher you've had? Story 1. Had a math teacher in high school that would learn as we went. She would be in the middle of a lesson, then pause for a bit and mumble to herself. Now, how did they get that answer while reading from the book? There would be times when we were taking notes and she would completely muck it up by mixing different lessons and have to redo all the notes. Story 2. English teacher, 5th grade. I guess I'll just make a list. The gap between the dustbin and the teacher's desk in our classroom was about 15 feet, 4.5 meters, and she spit, yes, spit, every day sitting on her chair hoping to get the bin. Needless to say, she failed every time, and we ended up having a disgusting, spitty floor. In our school, we had a free period every day until 5th, standard for us to do whatever we want from studying to sleeping, and no teacher was allowed to teach anything in that period. Now, this person decides to teach in our free period and threatens to fail us if we didn't study. She forced me to quit my band practice. Our school had a church in its campus, and the school was run de facto by the authorities of it. This called for a separate opening and closing school prayer at the beginning and end of school. We all usually sung in unison, and one day some of the students started saying the end of the day prayer in the morning. Our teacher flipped out and went on to give us the "if you don't respect God, don't mock him" BS. We were a couple of 10-year-olds and it was a genuine mistake. Well, her solution to this problem was to only allow the boys and girls she saw to say the prayer every day while she mocked and criticized every other kid on how bad they had been. Our winter vacations started 2 or 3 days before Christmas, and our school organized a Christmas program before the winter break. This same teacher came as Santa to distribute candies among children, and this one girl took 2 instead of 1. She slapped her and took 1 back. It doesn't sound that bad, but again, it was 5th grade. Can you imagine being slapped by Santa in 5th grade? That poor girl cried all day. If we had to write something down, she always spoke as fast as she could. I'm in college now and quite literally still won't be able to keep up with that speed. That's how fast she spoke. There was a bully in our class, let's call him Deke, who used to pick on one of my friends on a daily basis. Mostly he just let it slide because it wasn't that bad, just the usual stuff of teasing, calling names, etc., etc. But one day, just out of the blue, Deke starts hitting and abusing my friend. We, as a group of 3 or 4, decided this has to end now and take this matter to the aforementioned teacher. She was our class teacher, and told her everything. We didn't know this before, but Deke turned out to be a suck-up for the teacher, and she plain denied the fact that Deke could even think of doing any such thing. Persisting, she asked us to tell exactly what he said. As soon as we start quoting him, she starts hitting us and scolding us for using dirty and abusive language. She was exposed eventually and was immediately fired. She taught for a brief 10 or 11 months. Story 3. Sophomore year of high school, I was in an algebra class. On the first day of class, the teacher made it abundantly clear that she didn't care about half the class and flatly said she doesn't give out grades. Books are distributed to the class, she goes over a few basic rules, and she starts moving people around to different seats. As the school year progresses, she finds one student after another to pick on until they either stop coming to class or drop the class. Towards the end of the year, she finally settles on me for some reason. I had fairly decent grades, always turned in my homework, and was generally quiet in class. The teacher starts to criticize my work, how I arrived at the answer, and in general starts nitpicking anything and everything. Then I start to inexplicably fail tests. Homework would come back with correct answers marked as incorrect. I started protesting this with no effect. At the time, I wasn't too concerned as it was almost all done and I figured that I could limp through with a D. I also had earlier fulfilled my math credit requirements, and this was just an extra class to fulfill the school's requirements and to firm up my shaky understanding of algebra. One day, I get into class and she calls me up to the front of the class and confiscates my book, telling me since I'm not doing the work, I don't need the book. She also asks for my home number so she can call my parents, which I tell her. I hand over my book, realizing that I'm in trouble and I need to do something. I'd been keeping my mother up to date on these developments, and when I got home that afternoon, I told her the latest developments. True to form, my mother accused me of having had done something to deserve that. A few days later, the teacher leaves a very confusing message on the answering machine, and when my mother calls back to talk to the teacher, she refused to take the call. The next day I'm in class, really unable to do much of anything since I didn't have a book to work from. She starts handing out a test and she makes it a point to skip me. After she returns to her desk, she calls me up to it and loudly tells me I can have a test, but no matter how well I do for the rest of the class, she's going to fail me for the year. After I took that test, I decided to skip my next class and finally talk to the guidance counselor, which I should have done a few weeks before. She said she would check into it. The next day I go into class, get seated, and the teacher immediately tells me to leave, that I had failed the class and not to return. I go to the office to report this development, who seemed skeptical but released me for the rest of that period. When I got home, I told my mother, who had talked to the teacher and asked questions, but found the answers she was getting to be vague. Since I was banned from class and looking at an F for it, I had gone to talk to my guidance counselor again, and this time she started moving things. I have no idea what deal she struck with the administration, but I was told that if I withdrew from the class, they would erase the F and the class, but in return, I would have to take it the following year, and I was given assurances that I would have a different teacher. A day or two later, I get the withdrawal form and have to bring it to her to sign it. I walk into class with the form and try to give it to her, and she absolutely refuses to take it, telling me I had already failed and there was nothing I could do about it. I give up and return to the office and explain what happened. The principal told me to have a seat and had her paged to the office. She shows up a few minutes later with a very angry look on her face. There's a short conversation between them in the far corner. Then he takes her into his office. About 10 minutes later, she emerges enraged, glares at me, and storms out. The principal calls me into his office and shows me she had signed and I was all set. But before I went, could I go over all my experiences with her? I detailed what I had seen with the other students that she focused on that had failed or dropped the class, and then my experiences with her. What ultimately happened with all the information, I don't know. What I do know is the following year, I retook the class with another teacher, got a B, and for that year, every time I saw the teacher, she always gave me dirty looks and refused to acknowledge my existence. Story 4. Oh God, my school was so messed up. My physical education teacher made fun of my eating problems in front of the class, so yeah, she was freaking horrible. My physical education teacher made fun of my eating problems in front of the class, so yeah, she was freaking horrible. My literature teacher really bullied a few students he didn't like out of the school. Another physical education teacher of mine would throw her keys at students if they weren't paying attention. A friend of mine had the keys thrown in her face. My Latin teacher liked making students cry. He would pick someone who was struggling in Latin to translate a text, laugh at every mistake, telling them how much they sucked and how easy that is and how they wouldn't amount to anything in life. After exams, he'd read out the worst papers to the class, laughing all the time. Math teacher also bullied students he didn't like, examined them every math class. All the old teachers bullied new teachers. They never got to do anything new. All ideas were stopped. Chemistry teacher called a girl out in class, told her how she was too fat for her shirt and that it was disgusting. She herself was really overweight. Those were only the mean teachers. The incompetent ones were pretty bad too. Biology teacher talked about plants 2 years straight, never anything else. And the thing is, what we learned about the plants was freaking wrong. Italian teacher ordered pizza for herself, ate it while she talked about her dogs the day before an important exam. She had no idea how to teach, and none of her students ever even learned to speak Italian. Geography teacher took us during class to walk his dog, but still had us take exams that were freaking horrible. He also told us to start smoking. I've got so many more. Edit. Since you wanted more, here you go. Same geography teacher would make you run laps around the building if you were too active, made you remember a whole page word by word with punctuation if you sneezed or said bless you, and just generally address 11-year-olds in a way military style with spit flying around that frightened all. Like I said above, physical education teacher thought it would be a good idea to discuss her idea that I was bulimic in front of the class, telling me loudly not to throw up my lunch afterwards. Are you bulimic? You look bulimic. I bet you are. Try not to throw up your lunch afterwards. But since humiliating me obviously wasn't enough, picked a new victim about a year later. Told this girl that she was way too fat. Yes, she was overweight, but not drastically. That she would fail her next year if she didn't lose weight. So that girl lost a lot of weight, but in a healthy way. Sports, eating right, etc. Anyway, the next year, the teacher is all weird with this student, and after a few months called her mother, telling her that she was sure that her daughter was, of course, anorexic. Headmaster drove drunk and crashed into a tree, but we were not allowed to run in the hallway. That's dangerous, duh. Math teacher called a girl to the blackboard. She had to do a calculation and obviously wasn't going to get it done. So what does bully teacher do? Every minute that passed without her finishing, the whole class would get one more exercise for homework. Same teacher bullied 4 students he didn't like out of not only his class, but also out of school. One time a student came sick to school and had biology as first class, so after some time she started coughing and took one sip out of her bottle. All hell broke loose. The biology teacher flipped, screamed like a madman, "So if you're going to drink, I'll drink. I can also drink. I can also eat, and I now can take a break." Student, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just really sick." And teacher, "So you think you can drink during my class? My class? My freaking class? You students have so many breaks. Do you even know how hard being a teacher is?" Stormed out of class. She came back about 10 minutes later, holding a glass of water and said, "See, I can drink too." Ah. She was horrible to that student for the rest of the year. English got angry, threw an open bottle through the class, so bathing half a dozen students with Diet Coke. After that, he threw another one out of the window while screaming, "You all shut up now! Now! Shut up!" Woodwork teacher screamed at me when I was 7 because I didn't hit a nail properly and it didn't go into the plate straight. She asked over and over again how stupid I really was, and when I started crying, she told the other students how stupid I was and that I was a crybaby, and generally that I sucked. Ran over, for now. Story 5. We had a guidance counselor who, in the 80s, was impregnated by her student, John Doe. Before this, she was also caught groping an 8th grader at a dance. Nothing much happened to her, except being promoted to a guidance counselor, even after her colleagues admitted they knew she had a thing for young boys, and she just continued on. She had her baby, John Doe Jr., and after John Doe graduated, they married. Fast forward to 2004-ish, and Mrs. Doe is now a high school guidance counselor, and John Doe Jr. is in high school himself. He has a best friend that has a troubled home life, and the Doe family invites him to live with them. Mrs. Doe starts an affair with her son's best friend, and because she is a guidance counselor, and especially because he is a troubled boy, she has control over his class schedule. She arranges his schedule around her breaks so they could sneak off and be intimate throughout the day. It is eventually discovered by his family, and she's allowed to retire early with full benefits. The school board even throws her a party. She finally admits guilt, but because of the glowing references from her colleagues, she's only given probation and does not have to register as a sex offender. Story 6. My grad school advisor. I took a few classes from him. The last class, non-parametric stats, I took from him before I learned my lesson had me crying half the time because I couldn't get the 20-plus-year-old stats programs to work on my Windows 7 laptop. I had to have an IT friend put in an XP shell for them to finally work, as well as having to work on computers in his lab. I also had an hour commute one way from my city to the school on top of working full-time. I also have number flipping issues and some spatial issues, so it's slow for me to catch on if I don't know why numbers are doing what they're doing. Plugging numbers into a computer program and getting a graph result number might as well be wand-waving magic to me unless I can understand where and why things are moving and changing the way they are. Finally got through it, but it was so painful. He never showed up for meetings, office hours, and would often flake out. One of the few times I did track him down in office hours, he, towards the end, told me, "It's in the darn book," on trying to figure out where I was going wrong. I was also getting negative results for my class project, which I later found out indicated an inverse relation, and when I asked him about it, he said, "I have no idea what that means." Not, "I've never come across that, let's figure out what's causing that," or anything positive or curious. I only ended up passing the class because I quit going to him for help and used YouTube videos as my primary study aid for explaining how to run the programs and what the results meant. This was my grad school advisor, a man I had been personally paying tens, thousands of dollars to help me for 3 years. He also royally screwed me over on his advice part as well, and I spent many, many months trying to clean up from his either bad or non-existent information. I absolutely admit I made some mistakes. I made some classic textbook grad school mistakes, but I also didn't have a guy who was there who could at least help mitigate or minimize those issues. I did everything myself to force myself into the right classes and get help from the right teachers so I could graduate in 3 years and not 4, even though I'd wanted out in 18 months, 2 years. I have just never had a worse teacher and mentor my entire life. It got so bad his arch rival in the school was a better teacher, friend, and mentor in the 2 classes I took from him. I wasn't expecting much from my advisor. I didn't need a Dr. Cox type in my life breathing down my neck, nor did I expect that much effort. But I did need him to at least give the minimum effort for how much money I paid him and the school. I was not the only one who had problems with him. In the 7+ years he was there, he'd graduated 3 grad students the entire time, and all 3 of us graduated the same year. One immediately declared the same day she finished that she was quitting the field and doing something else. And she was the one who had worked the hardest for him, always in the lab, and he had personally pushed her to do his research project even though she'd wanted to do something completely different. I pretty much said the exact same sentiment. At this point, I'm just getting the degree. It's a sterile Master of the Arts because there's no way I think I can do this anymore. By the time I left, his continuation at the school was very much in debate. He got his tenure hearing pushed back a couple of years, so I don't know if he's still there or not. He probably is because he's got an awesome $1 million lab, but still. Story 7. First year of university, contemporary educative institutions and theories professor. Wouldn't allow dyed hair in her class because it was unnatural. Wouldn't allow makeup in class for the same reason. Wouldn't allow Coca-Cola products, clothes, pens, etc. because it was classist. Wouldn't allow Disney products in class, clothes, pens, etc. because he was a child abuser. Wouldn't allow staples in class because they were violent. Would only allow recycled paper because the environment. Lady, we're broke students and recycled paper was expensive back then. Spend classes ranting about things completely unrelated to education, like IKEA. IKEA kills rainforests. IKEA uses slave labor. IKEA is evil. This for hours. Yay, I totally failed that class. Story 8. My senior design professor, vibrations teacher, same guy. Dear God, did this guy just freaking suck. Not only did he assign too many projects, 8 projects for 22 people, one of the projects was a perpetual motion device, and 2 projects did not have a budget. Every project needed to be on the same timeline. Even the one whose sponsor said, "We don't expect a prototype design until March," had to have a design in December or the students would fail. He had no industry experience whatsoever. A completely academic engineer. When your only class is dealing with industry people and industry expectations, dear God. Not to mention that we were assigned a design analysis after we built the project. Story 9. My middle school had a system where they would split the students up into 4 categories called families, which ultimately created segregation amongst students. My first period teacher in the 8th grade upheld the segregation in a football sort of way, saying that her family was the best, even though our period was a mixed group. I and a few others, not a member within her family, were sort of like Jan Brady that gets ignored every once in a while. I was a pretty shy kid. I never talked to anyone in my classes unless it was my friends. One day, we had to do group presentations. I was the first one up and nervous as heck. I had my head down looking at my paper. Right when I said the first word, "Hey, that was very rude." I looked up, frightened. I saw that red-haired dude, spooked, just got back from barely sharpening his pencil. Was she talking to him? "Do not start until everyone is done." Settled. He, red hair, was sharpening his pencil. What is wrong with you? I hesitated. I'm confused. I mumbled a stammered sorry, mumbled through my part of the speech, and spent the rest of my time up in front of class holding my tears.